So, when you buy a Balisong, one of the most important things to look out for is the handle material, and that is for a really good reason. The material of your handles will really greatly impact how this thing is going to flip. So today I'm going to be covering 5 different materials. These are the most common from what I've seen, and hopefully this will help kind of beginners suss out the pros and cons of each type of material, and then you can find out what value you want to get. So today we'll have the palette for plastic, although this kind of doesn't really fit into plastic, kind of. I'll explain why. So we have plastic, we have the cannon for steel, we have the Sasori for aluminum, we have a wrap clone for G10, and we have an Astra for titanium. So let's start with plastic. When it comes to plastic, a lot of beginners might look into plastic as their first Balisong, and that's for a pretty good reason. Plastic is the cheapest option, and that's, well, because plastic is cheap, and it is very easy to machine. And a lot of the Balisong's cost does come from machining, so that's why these cost so much more. But yeah, when it comes to plastic, the biggest pro is going to be cost. And, so why not just buy a plastic Balisong when you start out? I'll tell you why. It's probably gonna break. Okay, not probably, but there is a much higher chance of a plastic belly breaking over these things. Even if you get one that's known to be durable, like the Squiddy, they can still be prone to breaking, and they are bound to be more prone to breaking than anything that's metal. So, from what I've seen, the most durable plastic belly out there is the Zippy, was it the Cycloid? The Cycloid HD? Apparently the only time it broke was when somebody slammed their car door into it, which is kind of funny, but yeah, so plastic bellies are not going to be durable, and you cannot expect them to be durable considering their price. So yeah, that's the main trade-off of plastic. There's not much to mention. I guess the only thing left for me to say is plastic is very light, and that can kind of result in something called Squiddy syndrome. So for those of you who do not know, although most of you probably do, the Squiddy is a plastic Balisong from Squid Industries, and it is this little white Balisong, and it is made of plastic, and it is very light. So the term Squiddy syndrome is when you flip a Squiddy for an extended period of time, then you go back to metal, or vice versa, and it just feels horrible, because you're not used to a, I guess, more conventional weight distribution anymore, because the Squiddy is so damn light. And the belly that I have with me right now, or any belly from this company, Flipforge, their Balisongs kind of remove that drawback, kind of, from plastic, because they have metal frames, including, in the blade as well. So for Flipforge bellies, the premium palette, the normal palette, and the edit light, they have metal frames inside the sides of the handles and the whole blade. And that means this is heavier than our usual plastic bellies. So I never ever get Squiddy syndrome for this unless I'm going from this straight to something that's like super heavy. Or not super heavy, but something more heavy, like the Astra. So if you're gonna try to get a plastic belly, I would really suggest Flipforge because, it is not super light and it's still pretty reasonably priced. I believe the palette is 55. The premium palette is 85, the normal palette is 55, and the edit light is also 55 or 50. So they are relatively reasonably priced, and they are pretty good at flipping. So that is plastic all the way. Last thing to mention in plastic is that it is easier to take through your TSA, just not the Flipforge stuff because metal. So let's move on to, get out of here. Let's move on to steel. So steel used to be a more common material with stuff like the Kershaw Lucha, but eventually it got phased out a bit, and that's because steel is so freaking heavy. So you might notice that the cannon here is really skeletonized. Like there's damn near no material on the handles, especially compared to something like my Sasori. But this thing feels very heavy compared to the rest. So it's not like unflippably heavy, right? So something that's super heavy would be like the Lucha. But this thing is quite a bit heavier than what you would assume from something that is this size. And that is just because it is made of stainless steel. And the whole belly is made of stainless steel. So that means this belly is cheap because steel is cheap. It's durable because it's steel. Steel is very durable compared to steel is very durable compared to the more common material, which is aluminum. So if you want to like get a belly that's going to really tank, steel might be the way to go. And steel is also quite grippy. It is like pretty much up there with titanium in my opinion, because I think the Canyon is one of my grippier Balisongs, especially considering it is not textured in any way, other than this I guess, but you don't really feel it. But still, the Canyon is pretty grippy, but you know, it is kind of heavy. So steel is a pretty basic material overall. Not too many pros and cons, it's pretty just flat out on the board. It's heavy, it's cheap, durable, grippy. Pretty good. So if you're just starting out, steel might be a good option. Just note, a lot of steel Balisongs are very heavy. On to aluminum. This is probably the most common material for both like budget and mid-range flippers. So for budget, you'll be looking at stuff like the Volp, the Cheese, the Orion, and for the mid-range, you'll be looking at stuff like the Wing, the Sasori, the Sirius, and these are all made of aluminum, although they are different alloys. So for the cheaper stuff, they'll usually be made of 60-61 aluminum, and for the more expensive stuff, they will usually be 70-75. Now there's also 70-68 aluminum, but I haven't really seen anybody use it. Maybe it's because it's too hard to machine. But point is, aluminum has quite a few, not quite a few. Aluminum has very few things to talk about because it's like a very basic material. So aluminum is going to be cheaper than your titanium stuff, although it is still not super cheap. And if you go for 70-75, it's going to be more expensive because it's harder to machine. So that's the first upside and downside. Secondly, aluminum is very, and I want to emphasize this, aluminum is very slippery, and I am not trying to over-exaggerate it in any sort of way. My V1 extrusion is probably the most slippery metal object I've ever come across. It is incredibly slippery, even though the side texturing of the handles does help a bit. But the flat faces are super slippery. Even with my Sasori, which is quite expensive I might add, it is 220 USD. With the Zippy inserts, it ended up almost being 300. These sides are so slippery. They are incredibly slippery. It is really hard to do. Okay, it's not really hard, I just kind of suck, but it's definitely harder to do ladders on here than any of my other bellies because the sides are so slippery and the jimping is not super deep. So one of the biggest cons of aluminum is going to be grip. Then again, one more thing about aluminum. It's not really a pro or con, it kind of depends on what kind of guy you are, I guess, what your preferences are. But aluminum is lighter than titanium. So that means your aluminum flippers will usually be more agile, and they will also tend to be better at kind of changing directions, like in a ricochet, like you just saw. So for your heavier Balisongs, they will usually take more effort, like the Canyon, but your aluminum stuff will tend to be more agile. So that is a upside. And the final downside of aluminum is going to be durability. So aluminum is quite soft compared to the rest of these. It's not like super soft like gold, but nobody's using gold for bellies. But Balisong material wise, at least for metal, aluminum is kind of as soft as you can get. It is not super durable. It's not like going to fall apart on you or anything, right? It's not going to shatter, but it will really easily take on any cosmetic damage. Like if it just drop on the floor, it's probably going to get dinged like pretty well. Especially if it's 60-61. I didn't even drop my Volp that much when I still had it, but by the time I sold it, which was like not even a month into flipping, the bottom of the handles looked pretty beat up, man. I just dropped it like a few times on a flat concrete floor and damn, that thing looked like it's been through the goddamn Vietnam War. So, aluminum overall, cheap, light, quite easy to maneuver, but slippery, not very durable. So that's aluminum. Let me adjust this head mount a bit so you guys stop going down and it doesn't restrict blood flow to my brain. Okay, less of a headache. So this is a replicant. It is a clone of the BRS replicant, and you know, I don't have enough money to buy a real rep and I don't think it's worth it, so I'm gonna settle with a clone. If you don't like it, don't watch, I guess. But this is a replicant and it is covered in G10 scales. The inside is titanium, but that's not important for now because the majority of the part that you're gripping is gonna be the G10, so that's what I'm talking about. G10 is a kind of plastic, I guess, which is very, 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 very grippy. So the biggest like advantage of G10 compared to anything else with different liners or no liners at all, or scales, sorry, not liners. The difference with having G10 scales is you can basically put grip onto any Balisong material that you like. So even if your ballet is not completely G10, which it rarely is, right? So with stuff like the Thomas Balisong default, with the replicant, with the Prometheus backline, I believe, they all have different material liners. So the default is on 60 words, is on 6061 aluminum, and the backline and the rep is on grade 5 Thai. But the grip is pretty much going to be always good with any of them because they have G10 scales. So the advantage of G10 is that it is very grippy and it is also going to be quite light, so it's going to reduce the overall weight of your Balisong. But a kind of a deal breaker for some people is that G10 can feel chalky. So this replicant, I have already oiled the scales like a little bit. It does kind of feel chalky and I don't love touching it. It's not a deal breaker for me, but for some people they just can't stand the feel of G10. So that is something to take note of. So G10 does kind of just feel icky to some people, but you cannot deny that G10 gives you a ton of grip. Now, the other downside of G10 is that it can be kind of a cost raiser. So if a Balisong was not supposed to be that expensive, like material-wise, integrating G10 might bump up the cost by quite a bit. I think a great example would be the Vault Pro. So the Vault Pro, I think, right, Nabalis being a Chinese maker, just those materials should not be too expensive. But the problem is the integration. Same goes for the Cygnus. So the LDY Cygnus and Vault Pro have like really, really unique G10 integrations. They actually put inserts into the handles, and that complicates assembly, that complicates machining. So it's gonna add a lot to operating costs. So drives up the cost of the Balisong. So G10 can increase the price of a belly, but usually, you know, it gives you a ton of grip, so maybe it's worth it. Who knows? So G10, main advantage, grip. Main downside, feel in the hand. Pretty simple. On to the next. So this right here is, I think most people can accept. This is probably like peak handle material. This is grade 5 titanium. Titanium is basically what is standard for all the more expensive Balisongs. So anything that's like $275, $300 onwards, you're probably gonna find that they are all titanium, and that's for a very good reason. Titanium is the best of all of these, like in terms of basically anything. Titanium is grippy enough that you don't need G10. Titanium is heavy enough, but it's not as sluggish as stainless steel. It is still agile enough, so it's definitely not as floaty as plastic while still carrying its weight. And once again, same thing applies to aluminum. This is capable of being as light as aluminum without being as, you know, not fragile, as easy to damage, because titanium is so durable. Titanium is basically the best of every category, but the main problem is, well, price. So this Astra over here costed me $395 USD. The base model is $345, and that is not very cheap, especially when I say the prices of all of these. The pellet was $100 with the dual tone blade. The Canyon was $50, Sasori 220, nearly 300 with the Zippy inserts, and the wrap was I think it was like 35, 45 Singapore dollars, maybe like 30 USD. So as you can see, those are much cheaper than the Astra or my Superfly, in fact, because titanium is, first of all, it is a more expensive material, but it's not that expensive, especially if it's sourced in China, which this is because, you know, made by Thomas Balisong. So titanium is more expensive than all these, but the main thing is it is super hard to machine. And that's why most titanium things are so expensive. So that includes Balisongs, your frames for your specs, yo-yos. Anything with titanium is going to be more expensive because of the machining costs. That's why when you see stuff like titanium wire, you'll see like, oh hey, it's titanium, but why is it so cheap? Because there's not a lot of machining involved, it's just raw titanium. But machining is the bulk of the cost. So when it comes to buying titanium Balisongs, you're getting the best of every world, but you are certainly paying the price in terms of, well, price. So overall, I would say if you are a beginner, all of these will work, including this. But if you want to be more frugal, probably just stick with aluminum, steel, and plastic. But I think generally, most of the time, Balisongs will just be within aluminum and titanium because these have proven to work so well. So overall, I would say aluminum's pretty good, it's pretty standard. Titanium is even better, it is the standard for more expensive stuff. So when it comes to considering materials, those are the two main ones, and the rest are all just outliers. So overall, best material I think is probably titanium. Aluminum is a close second, then it's plastic, then it's steel, and G10, just because I don't love the feel of G10. But it's all personal preference, so whatever material you like, you can use it. It's going to affect flipping a little bit, but it's not going to, you know, make the flipping or ruin it. And most of the time, the construction is going to matter more than the material because, you know, no matter what kind of material you have, you can change the balance profile of your Balisong to kind of match it, complement it. So overall, material is important for a few things, but it is not the end all be all for buying a Balisong. And yeah, that's pretty much it for now. A lot of yapping. Next week I'll have a video on the Audi Y Vixen V2. Look forward to that. And yeah, that's about it. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.